This is Dan Titus, Chief Executive Officer of HRP Associates, who sat down with us to talk about his role as CEO.
Hey Tom, what do you want to talk about?
So Dan, we're back where we filmed the channel intro for the YouTube video.
Yeah.
The vision for the channel is actually relatively simple. The idea is to get lots of our professional people out into this digital space. The world is becoming more and more digital. People are working remotely these days. People are worried about having face-to-face contact. So that's where the world is going. And the idea is that we're going to provide free professional services through this channel to the community at large.
Yeah, that was several years ago, I think, at this point. It's pretty funny because, it was sort of a cockamamie idea at that particular point in time. And so we're waving our arms around about it, making a big deal. Hey, we're an engineering company making a YouTube channel. And here we are, this many number of years later, and it's become a pretty big part of our business. We're getting a lot of very positive reviews. It's adding value to the company. It's attracted outside interest from like the investment community. So it feels like we made the right decision.
So developing ideas like that is part of the job of the CEO, but what would you say is both the day-to-day and maybe the 30,000-foot big picture role of a CEO?
Sure, I'll do that in reverse. So the 30,000-foot role of the CEO, the sort of the Google answer is, to return value to the shareholders. And, that's no different in my role. So my job is to return value to HRP shareholders and its stakeholders. From a day-to-day perspective, I think that sort of bifurcates into two sort of simple categories. One is strategy development. And so, strategy development is simply, creating ideas about, so like a YouTube channel, creating ideas about from where we are to where we want to be. So, creating a strategic vision to sort of move the company into the future. And then the other part of it is day-to-day problem solving, mostly administrative problem solving, sort of chief administrator, if you will. But in the implementation of the strategy, trying to get from where we are to where we want to be, of course, we run into all sorts of obstacles and issues and problems and so on and so forth. And a lot of the more complex ones end up in the CEO's office because it needs, the executive authority to sort of push past them.
What do the phrases punch above our weight and work hard, play hard mean to you?
Sure. So punch above our weight is a phrase that has been applied to HRP, frankly, for as long as I've been here. And it's not an internal phrase, actually. It comes from external sources. Simply, HRP is not a large company, especially in this mega merger space that we live in now. There's just gigantic companies out there with literally hundreds of thousands of employees, and we don't exist in that space. But when we have a rather diverse service profile and a rather diverse client profile, or footprint, I should say, and when we engage against those larger service providers in those spaces, we compete toe-to-toe with them. Our capabilities, the quality of our service, our technical resume is very strong. And I think when somebody says we punch above our weight, that's precisely what they're referring to.
And of course, it's more than just what's on paper, it's also the vision of the company. So for you, what does it mean for a company to have a vision?
This is something, having a vision is something, business school, there's courses around it. It's a idea that's taught, across those spaces. There's lots of, Harvard Business Review articles about it. Everybody's talking about visions. Everybody's talking about culture. That's sort of the ethos that exists out there. But I think, having a vision is more, nuanced, I think, than it's given credit for in, sound bites. And I think having a vision is about trying to take the space that you're in or the attributes that you have and mixing them together in a way that creates something greater than itself. And, that's the castle on the hill kind of idea. And then, the implementation of that vision, which gets into strategy, is how do you build that castle on the hill? How do you become the thing that you desire to be?
So how do you see HRP living up to your vision, both in the present moments and going forward?
Yeah. So, I've been at HRP a long time. The interesting thing about this organization is that it has this really, it even goes back to the question you asked before about punching above our weight. It has this really rich history, both culturally and from a professional practice perspective. So a lot of the attributes that are attractive about HRP are sort of long built into the company. We'll call it the foundation. But the company is 42 years old, and some of the ideas, the basic sort of intrinsic cultural ideas of the company that were built long ago need to be evolved into something that's a little bit more modern. The elements of the vision are here, really, but the execution of the vision requires, carving off or shaving off some of the hard edges of things that are no longer, shall we say, socially acceptable, for example, and modernizing them to make them more inclusive, for example. But it's sort of, it's really built in this original idea. So the elements of the vision are there. It's just bringing them together into a cohesive fabric, a full idea, if you will, and then executing on that idea that's consistent with, the modern business space and modern, sociological expectations.
So does that role kind of reflect how you see your position as CEO relating to the values of HRP?
Yeah, it does. I mean, in that respect, I think I'm the emissary of the idea. And sometimes being an emissary does not necessarily mean being the person that's out there in front of everything. Have to be sensitive to, all the people who, bring themselves to work every day and come from different backgrounds, have different ideas about, how things should operate. And if we're going to be the best version of ourselves, sometimes, being the emissary means being the facilitator. So I try to, move back and forth in that space between, old-fashioned ideas here, leading by example. Sometimes leading by example means stepping back and letting other people put their hand on the steering wheel and emulate what it is that we're trying to accomplish here. So I really see that aspect of my role that way. So I feel like I need to, when things are not happening the way that we want them to, or we have internal problem, internal conflict, like I need to sort of say, hey, this is how we do this, or this is how we are, or this is the way that we need to be, whatever the situation is. And then sometimes I need to back out of that situation and let the organization take on a life of its own, let the people who make this organization possible sort of run the organization, if you will, from that perspective. There's lots of different ways to look at this, but look at me. I can't be a representative of all people. All I can really be is a representative of the company and try to create the environment that is inclusive of all of the people.
How do you feel about HRP's future?
I feel great about HRP's future. I think that HRP's future, as it sits right now, is better perhaps than it ever has been. This company was founded coming out of sort of the Clean Water Act and the RECA regulations way back in the day. So it's really always been an environmental engineering company as opposed to an engineering company that dabbles in environmental stuff. The space that we're in has just become more and more and more active and more defined as we become more conscious of how our manufacturing process, for example, has an attendant impact on the environment that we live in, which have negative effects on people from a health perspective. And so as we learn more and more about those things, those spaces, those ideas, this industry just gets more and more cemented into, the process that is part of our economy. So we need to be able to manufacture things, build things, burn things, use energy, all of that sort of stuff. But we also have to try to figure out how to do that in a way that is protective of, the people that work there or the neighborhoods that are adjacent or just, the planet at large kind of thing. I don't think that, some people will say we're environmentalists. That's not really true. We're sort of environmental industrialists in a way. Our business is all about that space, but it's about that space and making that space as safe and healthy as possible.
Dan, thanks so much for sitting down with me today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Tom, as always.
Thanks.
The YouTube channel rocks.
It does. And subscribe.